Family Lifestyles. I'm Lynn, Blankenship, the Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences Education in Metcalfe County. And today I am joined by Mason Crawford from Kentucky State University. Mason is the Area Ag Agent Coordinator, and he is the 2022 KSU State Extension Associate of the Year. Mason works out of the Hardin County Cooperative Extension Office in Elizabethtown. He does work with farmers, homesteaders, specializing in poultry science, aquaculture, horticulture, agritourism, and agricultural sustainability. Mason has previously been on our show, and we are really looking forward today to learning more about aquaculture with Mason. Welcome.
Very glad to be here, and aquaculture, specifically aquaponics, is one of my favorite things to work with, especially during the summertime. I do a lot of work with the Kentucky FFA Leadership Training Center, so I brought in a lot of items from that demonstration activity.
Yeah, it looks like fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited to learn.
Well, a big question that people often have is, what is aquaponics? It's not a word that you hear a lot when you were in elementary school or even through high school, because it's a relatively recent creation within the agricultural community. Gets its basis from a couple of root words. So basically aquaculture, which is the production of fish, and hydroponics, which is the production of plants in a soilless media.
Yes.
You combine those two together and you get aquaponics.
Okay. All right, so the beauty of this is that the fish provide the food for the plants, yeah?
Absolutely. That is the keynote, is that the waste material from the fish is the natural fertilizer for the plants.
That's a win.
And then likewise, the plants are helping just a bit to purify that water and make its way back through, removing that excess nitrogen that's in the water, because as we know, nitrogen is some of our plants' best friends. But there is a process to it. The fish waste, when it is first produced, is actually in the form of ammonia. Ammonia is toxic for the fish, so we have to remove it in some ways.
Okay.
You may think about your aquariums at home.
Yeah.
You always had that little cartridge filter box in the bottom of your aquarium. Charcoal and the filaments on top. Yeah, the puffy stuff on top. That is removing or converting that, cleansing the waste material. In a aquaponics system, we actually have a biofiltration system. So we're creating a natural biological control for that waste material.
Great. So what is in that system? What creates that filter?
There is a lot of surface area that's needed. So for example, the clay pebbles that we're going to talk about later, they can be used as a plant substrate, as they are in this instance, but they can also double as a biofiltration media.
Okay.
If you're making a homemade system, the little scrubby pads that you might have used, the plastic ones, cleaning dishes.
Those work?
Those work real well, because
And then you also have, is that rock wool?
that is rock wool.
I've heard of that before.
We'll talk about that in the segment when we're talking about the media for the plants.
Okay.
But on the biofiltration, we need something that is going to allow these two types of bacteria. There's Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter. They're both aerobic and anaerobic bacteria, respectively, meaning some of them require moisture, some require more of a dry condition but it takes both of those to provide the most ideal plant or environment for filtering the water. So it converts it from that toxic ammonia to a form of nitrite, which is somewhat inert but still something we want to get out of the water, and convert it finally into the nitrate stage. The nice thing about the nitrate stage, that's what form the plant needs in order to be able to take up the nitrogen nutrients. It can't really readily take in ammonia or nitrite and get any benefit from it. So it's actually
bioavailability, you have to do that conversion,
Absolutely. It's a very sustainable approach. Another nice thing about aquaculture or aquaponics is that we're utilizing up to 80% less water than we would through a traditional or conventional production system, because we're recirculating that water. So a very small water exchange is required. Some systems it'll be a daily water exchange, others it'll be a weekly, but it is just a small percentage of the overall. And of course we're going to have some evaporative losses, and the plants are going to take up part of that water as well. So that's how that works.
Okay, so you periodically have to add some water into the system.
That is true.
Not all the time.
And that gets us to another point. Most of the time when we were growing up, a lot of us, we realized we had chlorine in our water. Well, a lot of the filtration systems have changed now. They're using a product called chloramine.
Okay.
With chlorine, you could let water set for 24 hours and it would dissipate out.
Yeah.
However, with chloramine, it takes up to a week.
Oh.
So you need to keep a ready supply of
Filtered
water. Well, you can filter the water, or you can just fill your buckets and let it set and let nature take its course.
Okay.
So we keep a 40-gallon drum of it at the FFA camp, and we do the recycling once a week out of that.
Okay.
And that's actually the water we're using with our fish today.
Great.
You'll notice how clear the water is here. Clear water is not always an indication of healthy water.
Okay.
And kind of foggy water is not always an indication of bad water. It has to do with what the oxygen level is and what the ammonia level, keeping the pH right, all of those different factors. And a simple test can be done with a water quality testing kit. You can do it with the chemical method like this. It's generally more affordable, and from an educational standpoint, it gets students or youngsters more engaged with some simple chemical procedures. Or you can get digital meters. They're a bit more expensive, but they can test on the spot.
So basically, you set it for what it's testing for, you stick it in there, and then it gives you a reading with the digital?
The digital meters, some of them have multiple settings for testing different things in the same meter. Some other meters are just individual for one parameter.
Cool.
In this instance, we would just fill a vial up to the fill mark, and there are separate instructions for each of the different types, and usually it is a color-coded system so that it allows for just gauging the color that is created, and it tells you what the parts per million or the rating is for that particular parameter.
And then there's certain things that you can do, I'm assuming, to adjust
That
if there's an issue.
That is correct, depending upon whether we're dealing with a pH situation or if we're dealing with the ammonia being too high. There are different chemicals that can be added. Of course, you can adjust your feeding regimen.
Okay.
You could be overfeeding, and the feed that breaks down in the water is going to pollute that water. So you might just need to do a controlled feeding, a little bit more
so
careful
that they
that
eat
way.
everything you're putting in
That's
instead
correct.
of letting some stuff sink down to the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what else do we need to know? This seems like such a great learning opportunity for the kids that you're working with.
Oh, there's so many opportunities. We have several schools that Kentucky State University works with. I'm just one member of our aquaculture team that goes out and visits at all the different schools. I have the pleasure of working with all of the FFA members that attend FFA camp during the summer. So it's somewhere around 2,800 students go through and learn, and those are generally the leaders within their organization. Sometimes they'll take that information back to their schools and convince their teachers that moving into aquaponics is a positive thing, in which case I get the opportunity to go work in the schools and help educate the teachers as well as the students.
So are there any schools that are using the fish in the cafeteria?
Yes, that's we'll talk.
The goal.
That's the goal.
We'll get to that.
The farm to cafeteria modeling, we'll be touching on that in a moment. But it's a model for this, and FFA camp serves as that stepping stone, because the lettuces and greens that are produced in the system ultimately make their way to some of the students that are attending the camp. Okay,
so that is fantastic, and we are going to continue to learn more about this aquaponics program in the next two segments. Stick with us.
The longer I live, the more I believe you do have to give if you want to receive. Been knocked down by the slamming door, picked myself up and came back for more. Life's a dance, you learn as you go. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. Don't worry about what you don't know. Life's a dance, you learn as you go.
Welcome back to Family Lifestyles, and we're back with Mason Crawford to learn more about aquaponics.
In our last segment, we were discussing the different parts of an aquaponics system, specifically the parts of an aquaculture system. We're going to put up on screen a cutaway that shows an actual rendering of the system that we use at the Kentucky FFA Leadership Training Center. So what you'll notice on screen is that we've got our typical stock tank where the fish are going to be, the fish tank. And then to settle out those solid waste, we're going to have the spiral flow filter. Another word for that is clarifier, basically getting the solid waste out of the material. And then we're going to move into the sump pump, which in some systems that's going to contain the biofiltration. In this particular system, that's not the case. It's rather just a collection basin for the submersible pump, which subsequently shifts it into the grow stands and the grow beds that are there. So there's a lot of different methods. There's some basic components, but the nice thing about this type of system is there's a lot of flexibility. As long as you meet those requirements that the fish need and they subsequently provide nutrients for the plants, it's a symbiotic relationship that works well. One thing to point out, it's not necessarily the most optimal plant conditions, but we are providing free nutrients. And sometimes the most affordable and the one that makes the most value and the most money for your investment, that's more important than your maximum production.
And environmental sustainability is huge with this system as well.
Absolutely. I think back to my even college years, and I took one of the first agricultural sustainability classes that was offered. And so it kind of instilled in me at that point. It led to some other career transitions that allowed for everything from working in the green industry in hotels to vegetative roofs and a number of other things. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about some of those
love
sometimes.
to talk about vegetative roof.
But for right now, we're going to just jump back into the second component of an aquaponics system, which is
the plants.
The plants, the hydroponics. So we've got a variety of those here. I will apologize. Some of them are a little wilted. One thing about it, while we're not necessarily providing the optimal nutrients, we are providing all of the other optimal conditions, because these came out of a greenhouse. They had the optimal condition. They never wanted for water, but that can make them quite tender, and reminds me of a trip I took to the biosphere out in Arizona. And one of the biomes there was dealing with a forest, and they discovered the trees were just not hardy at all because they grew so fast and they weren't stressed at all. And that can be the same thing. So the transport of some of the plants we brought with us, it's a little difficult, but bear with us on that. They were beautiful yesterday.
They smell really good, and they look really fresh. So I mean, I understand, they had to take a trip over, and they're looking good.
Well, thank you. There are different types of hydroponics. We're going to talk about our deep water culture. Any of you that were former tobacco growers, or maybe a few of you that are current tobacco growers, you might have raised plants on float beds. That was the common term. What we have here is an example of a float tray. And the plants, again, these have been harvested, so you'll notice a lot of the leaves are missing. But the nice thing about aquaponics is you can harvest as the plant is growing, and it continues to put on new growth, and you can harvest for a period of weeks. On the underside, you can see how the root system is just flowing down in the water. They are absorbing the nutrients from the fish water, particularly the nitrates. You leave just a little gap of water between, because roots also need some air in order to grow. We supplement that a bit by also having an aeration stone or an aerator inside even the plant beds, because oxygen is essential. A lot of us think plants only produce oxygen, but they also need oxygen for growth. So that is our float or our deep water culture. We also have a flood and drain. Flood and drain is just as it sounds. Water flows in, it sets for a period of time, and then it dissipates, allowing the roots to dry out. A lot of times
How long do they have to be flooded for? I'm just curious.
It just varies by system, but sometimes it's just a matter of minutes. Sometimes and then they'll flood, and the cycle repeats over and over. Sometimes systems can be set for longer depending upon what the plants are. And they still need stability. So a lot of times this was pulled from one of the flood and drain beds, which is got the hydroton. It's expanded clay pebbles, which provide the stability for the plants. And then we've also got some Swiss chard and some basil there that are examples of that. Our nutrient film technique is something more like water flowing, and the plants are in these little holes, and the water flows through from the tubes that let the water in. It drains out into a reservoir. In this case, if it was aquaponics, it would be going back into the fish tank and repeating that cycle. These can be somewhat costly if you buy them. I'm always a do-it-yourself kind of person, so you can recreate this using PVC. It's another culture, another type of system called tube culture, and we're going to do a little sample of that today. So you'll notice I already have one hole on there. The second hole is already marked. I do advise, unless you like watching wavy rows. I grew up on a farm where if you couldn't plant a straight row, you didn't need to be on the planter.
You need a plumb line.
Same way when I'm doing aquaponics. So it's already, a line has been drawn, the mark has been made. Ideally, you would have this in a vise or using a drill press. We are in a little different situation.
I'll be your vise.
But we're going to keep our hands far away from the drill. And I'm going to go in and set the set screw. This is a hole saw that I'm using. And it's a 2-inch hole for this particular situation. And then you take a plant that is in a rock wool cube that we already mentioned. It fits directly into that pot. And you can see that it allows the root systems inside to be flooded with water as the water flows. So that's kind of a nice system.
Awesome.
It's something that you can make yourself and go from there. The essentials for that is the rock wool cubes. This is made from balsic rock, and it is some chalk, and the basalt rock is heated up to nearly 30,000 degrees.
Wow.
So,
And that's what turns it into that texture.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it feels kind of almost like foam.
It is. It's
Yeah.
a bit of a, almost like a, well, you guessed it, it's like a foam.
Soaks up a lot of water, too.
And you can actually directly seed into this,
Okay.
or you can poke a little hole. Some of them come pre-formed with holes, and you can put the
Put your
seeds in, or you can put
start.
plants in there, starters in there.
Nice.
Same way with the Hydroton cubes. They're made from expanded clay pebbles, providing that stability. And then something else that I just wanted to mention is we're going to show another cutaway, and this is the actual photo of that aquaponics system at the Kentucky FFA Leadership Training Center.
Awesome.
One of our wonderful partners. That's the great thing about Extension, is finding good stakeholders and partners to
Absolutely.
work with. And it serves as a modeling for the food being produced and fed to the students. Kind of with the Kentucky Farm to School Network, follows that model.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at that system, you'll see a bunch of youth that are really engaged in that.
Excellent.
We had nearly 3,000 students that view that every summer. One year it was a sustainability class. The next year it was an ag advocacy class.
Okay.
Have a lot of great partner students that are college students that are staff in the summer that are doing that.
Nice. That's a good summer job.
Yeah. Now we have a couple other programs coming up. We're using the aquaponics systems at Lakewood Elementary. That's in Hardin County. They have worked with their school director, the school food service director, to be able to do that.
I love that.
And then St. Romuald School in Breckenridge County. I got my first start was actually in Russellville High School. So it's an independent school with no ag program, and they have a standalone aquaculture program.
That's great. So these are spreading across the state, and we're going to learn yet even more in the next segment. Come back.
How's business?
Good. Are you up to speed with the new beneficial ownership reporting requirements?
Sort of. What's it about?
It's a new initiative to help fight crimes like money laundering, fraud, and drug trafficking. A lot of small businesses like ours just have to report some basic info to the federal government about the real people behind them.
Reporting your company's beneficial ownership information is quick, secure, and free, and it helps protect U.S. national security. Learn more at fincen.gov/BOI.
Welcome back to Family Lifestyles, and we're back for the final segment with Mason talking about aquaponics and hydroponics. So what are we going to learn now?
We're going to pick up where we left off and just talk about some of the different types of plants that you can raise in an aquaponics system. Specifically, we learned that hydroponics is just an extension within aquaculture, combining the two words to make aquaponics. The nice thing about that is that it is as versatile as your outdoor garden. You just have to provide the stability for the plants.
Okay, so if it's something that grows really tall, it might be a little challenging to grow it in a tube setting like
That's
that.
correct, but there are solutions to that. You
Okay.
have sometimes light racks are just the structure of a greenhouse if it's being grown in a greenhouse, and you can extend strings down,
and
just like you do
support,
tomatoes
yeah.
in a high tunnel or a greenhouse, and so that is one way to do it. You can also trellis things. You can even grow things like pumpkins in aquaponics system. Small fruit like this, you just have to support the plants or let them cascade over the
Strawberries?
side. Strawberries work out well
Okay.
as well. There are some challenges with strawberries, but some, for example, LaRue County High School is doing some experiments with raising strawberries
Okay.
in their aquaponics system.
Nice.
So there's sometimes you run into some fungal issues when you're dealing with strawberries in an enclosed environment that's highly humid. So you have to be on top of that.
Yeah.
Basil plants, all your types of herbs are wonderful because that's something you just harvest little pinches at a
Yes.
time. The plant comes back and continues to produce for quite some time.
Well, harvesting those pinches makes for vigorous growth.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, and you can do your smaller fruiting plants like tomatoes, squash, different types of things. Grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes are ideal because they don't put a lot of weight and stress on the plant, and you're constantly harvesting that weight off instead of getting a 2-pound tomato
Has
off of
anyone
it.
tried like the small personal size melons, like the Cicada Sweet or something like that?
I'm sure there have been. If you go ever visit the Lands exhibit at Epcot Center, they have a lot of aquaponics. It's where I actually got my first ideas of working in aquaculture and aquaponics, was doing a tour there. So it's in the Epcot Center. I encourage anybody to pay for the extra tour. You get behind the scenes and learn about that, and they have a lot of melons that are growing in
Nice.
their aquaponics and hydroponics situations.
Okay.
So,
That's great. So
yeah.
we learned about the plants. Is there anything else that we need to know about the plant part?
Just
before we get to
remember the
fish?
leafy greens are the most common. So you're going to have your lettuces that can either be harvested as the entire bunch or as a leaf lettuce.
Nice.
Your greens work out great because, again, they like to regenerate and produce. So you're getting more than one crop off of a particular planting.
Yeah.
So those all work out real well. And then we're going to move in now to our aquaculture portion. You've seen the our three guests
Our
over here on the
buddies.
table for quite some time. And they just were waiting to be introduced. So there are actually a variety called koi, and two of them are actually, or one of them in particular for sure, is a koi goldfish hybrid.
Yeah.
It's a special strain that's been developed at Kentucky State University.
Okay.
It's kind of like a mule. By crossing those two different species of fish, they produce something that is sterile, which is ideal for a lot of garden ponds because we don't want our ponds to become overpopulated. Same way, even in natural made ponds, they
Yeah.
can become overpopulated.
Absolutely.
So that is the thing. Over generations, the few that do make it, it can increase the viability, but you're keeping it in check, so
Okay.
to speak. There are several species that you can work with. The most common is tilapia,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is one of the most popular food fish in the country right now, and we import 99% of our tilapia. So that's a great niche market to get into
That's
if you're
what they
looking from a
grow-
commercial basis.
That's what they grow at the West 5th in
Yeah,
Lexington.
absolutely.
Tilapia.
Yeah, West 6 has got
Or
a...
West 6th, sorry.
Yeah, they have a big tilapia production, and I'm pleased that Kentucky State had some involvement with that in the beginning and helping them get started. But it's a great PR piece. It's getting the word out to people about sustainable food production and do it in an urban setting. So that's a
great.
great thing. Check that out in Lexington if you get the opportunity.
Yeah, take a tour. It's really, really neat.
A lot of folks are interested in catfish. I'm personally not a big fan of them in an aquaponics or a recirculating system. They tend to stay at the bottom, which and they make murky water. It's difficult to tell just exactly what you're doing with them.
Okay.
But they are a good food fish, and people love it in Kentucky, right?
Yes,
Fried catfish.
people
So
love catfish,
that's a
for
good
sure.
thing. Your more game fish like bass just don't do well in
Aggressive.
circulating systems. They're aggressive with their peers,
Mm-hmm.
and they also don't like being in captivity.
Okay.
You never know what's going to happen on live TV.
There you go.
They've been here for an hour, no problems.
They're a little, yeah.
So they're a little antsy. They're ready to go back to the larger system. So, basically, that comes up to our next topic. Good transition or segue about stocking fish. You don't want to overstock your fish. The stocking density can become an issue. You're going to decrease their growth. You're going to increase the detrimental parts that are in the water. So this is definitely be too densely stocked. From a production standpoint, they're simply here for a visual standpoint.
Yes.
So
they're going to go back home and get into their
they're
larger
going back into their
environment.
300-gallon tank with their siblings. So that's a good thing. When you're first stocking, you want to be careful not to overfeed the fish, because if you get the water quality low from the beginning, you're playing catch up the rest of the time. So it's important to keep things like that. Now, the last thing that we're going to touch on is showing one of my favorite systems, and it's something that viewers might be inclined to do at home. I also want to point out that me and other associates from Kentucky State are available to help in this endeavor, but it is a DIY system, something that you can create at home. It's comparable to the system that's at the FFA Leadership Training Center, but it's something that you make yourself.
Yeah, that's
We're going to
great.
put a picture of that up on screen. It's showing some takeaways from the Kentucky State Fair in 2023. Not this year, but last year. And I was instrumental in being given the opportunity to help make that system.
Great.
And it's going to be going on display at a farm in Hardin County later this fall.
Good.
So people can check that out. And then it's going to Lakewood Elementary in the spring. So it's going to see a lot of miles and educate a lot of people. But it's something that can be made for, under $1,000 and give you the ability to produce a lot of plants and food for your family. If you choose to go the tilapia route or even the catfish route, you can harvest the fish. The advantage to raising koi or goldfish is that you can put small fry in, raise them up to a larger size, and some of these fish can be quite valuable to other pond owners that want to have those. So
the benefits of these type of fish in a pond are that they control the algae that can
That is
grow
right,
out of
and that's the one of the two reasons for producing that hybrid version we were talking about, is that there are different types of algae and vegetative material that goldfish like versus koi. By combining that hybrid, you can create situations where they do a good control of both of them.
Excellent.
And then subsequently without overpopulating your farm by reproducing out of control.
Okay, good deal. Fish we know is important for in your diet, and it can be very expensive when you have to buy it in the store. And if your family likes to eat a lot of fish, and you can build a system for around $1,000, it seems like a win-win.
What inputs are going into it. So there's a lot of question about some of the tilapia that's imported, and 99% of it is. We don't know
from China usually.
Yes, we don't know what might be in the fish that could be detrimental for us. So if we are raising it ourselves, that's a great thing. Another thing you may notice is this peculiar light we've got over here. If you're raising things aquaponically inside, not in a greenhouse, but inside your home or inside an area that doesn't get a lot of direct light, you can get grow lights. This is one that is formulated specifically for plant growth, so it's going to provide the full spectrum. But we have done research at Kentucky State where we're using just the inexpensive LED shop lights. Again, it's not always about the most optimal plant production. It's about the most economical plant production. You want to meet that economic threshold, so you can just make sure you provide lighting. So I hope that you'll try this.
Absolutely. Contact Mason at the Hardin County Extension Office if you have any questions about implementing a system like this at home. Thank you for joining us today.